once I click. There you go.
Oh, okay.
Alrighty. Awesome. All right, we'll get started in just a minute, folks.
I think there are 6 participants.
Yeah, they're trickling in.
Yay.
They're trickling in. You need those little chime things that they walk around, cons with.
We have panel. Oh, we are the panelists. We are the panelists.
Oh yeah, we are it. Give everybody a few more minutes to trickle back. Get ready. It also gives me a few more minutes to get some more caffeine flowing into the blood, because that is the elixir of life. Should have worn one of my coffee t-shirts. That would have been nice.
Or one of your mini cyber conferences shirts, eh?
Oh well, yeah, that's way too many of those. So no, actually the shirts I have now that I probably have more of that are driving my wife crazy is shirt.woot. I think she would learn how to be a security engineer just to block that site, because I spend way too much money on shirt.woot.com. I think the latest one I have that's my current favorite is there's 2 crows on the front, and then it says attempted murder, which I think is an awesome play on words. So
Gotcha.
So there you go. All right, we'll get 2 more minutes. What's that?
I see James. Well, I thought I saw him. Yeah, he's in the panelists.
All right. Well, we'll give him 2 more minutes. We'll start at 35, and then you know what?
He says stream as soon as y'all start. And I was like, sweet. Yeah. So it will be streamed.
Will be streamed.
Revolution will be streamed, people.
Yeah, right. It's not televised, but it is streamed.
Yes.
How old is that, man? You and I are just showing our age. Jeez.
Oh, we next time we will include social media. I'm sorry, trivia points in our.
Well, we'd probably have to have some kind of old man to millennial translator out there or something, so that
Okay, I think we can go.
You can go. All right. You ready? All right, cool. Let's start. All right. Hey, welcome to our talk, security engineers, which are not sysadmins, pen testers, analysts, or responders. And this is a talk that Lou and I have been passionate about, a field that we've done a lot with throughout our careers, and we just felt we needed to really highlight what security engineers are and do and how to get there. So with that, standard disclaimer, information is open source. Doesn't represent our employers or other things, so blah blah blah. So who am I? So I'm Craig Bowser. I have a bunch of really cool letters that get me through HR when I'm looking for jobs. I have been doing security for over 20 years. I've been in IT for almost 30 years. It's been a long time, and I have been in this field and really passionate about doing engineering and architect. I'm doing right now, that's what I'm employed as a security architect, finding really cool solutions, but I've done security engineering for a while. So, Lou?
Yes, thank you. I'm Ludwig Goon. I do go by the name of Lou. You can also check me out on Twitter. I don't necessarily do a lot of Twitter these days based on the climate. But anyway, I am also a person who has been in the security engineer IT field for almost 30-something years here. Currently, I work for a managed security service provider for one of the big auditing firms. And I do have a bunch of letters behind my name as well. And I've accumulated most of my experience in the defense contractor world. And again, I'm really excited to talk to you guys about, and ladies, about cyber security engineering. And I hope that you guys can take away some more information about this field and getting into this field going forward. So
Yep.
Back to you, Craig.
Awesome. So here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about what security engineer is, what their roles are. We're going to give you a framework because everybody needs a framework.
Everybody needs a framework. Yes.
Everybody needs a framework. We'll talk about the market. We'll talk about education, certification, and we'll also talk about some challenges and some of the outlook and really kind of the thinking of what a security engineer is and does and how they process information. So let's just jump right into it. First of all, let's get some level setting established. Let's define what actually secure, or what we are describing as a security engineer. And that is the process of designing and incorporating security controls into information systems. Really, you're making your operations secure. You're enabling your users, your IT, your developers, you're enabling them to do their job securely with the least amount of friction. That's the goal of security engineering. You're thinking past just the surface. You're thinking also above the bits and bytes to say, how can this person accomplish his goals, profit, to secure, to publish, to sell in a secure manner with the least amount of friction. So by that, then a security engineer is a professional of those tasks. At the same time, they understand the role where security fits into business, where security fits into the organization, and without being that roadblock, right? We want to get away from where that, security is the office of no. And I think as a whole, in general, the career field has moved away from that, but we still need to emphasize that we are not there. We are not the office of no, that we want to enable the business. And so security engineering is a really big part of that. I mean, we've come a long way, right, Lou, from as far as security, from, way back, back in the days, where we communicated with rocks and smoke signals, right?
Yeah. If you think about it, the beginning of the internet was basically in the late 1980s and early 1990s and things like that. You look at the history of computers and you look at all these things that have happened over time. The invention of the network to now we're dealing with cloud and mobile. And you look at all of that. You look at the progression of technology over time. You look at also what has happened in terms of what are the things that we had to deal with. We had to deal with basically viruses and worms in the beginning, to pretexting and phone phreaking, all the way up to now. We're still dealing with viruses in the form of ransomware, but we're also dealing with other attack vectors and other surfaces and things like that that have made our whole life more complicated as we were looking at listening to other talks. We're looking at scams now, internet scams and phone scams and mobile scams and things like that as part of the attack vector. So security engineering in this context is also developed from just being an IT kind of thing to a specialization, as you would see like a system administrator, pen tester, incident handler person. So this slide really portrays basically the evolution of technology, the evolution of where we went in information technology, and the evolution of the what we call the attack surface that we're dealing with today. So everything from I hate to say it, election fraud, people, doing data dumps from corporations, stealing credit cards and all that stuff, to still, spying on people as they browse, as spying on everyday people in other forms and things like that, and really an attribution to the industry as a whole that has developed along this framework and along this progression here. And who's to say what's next? And we'll talk about some of those things later on in the talk.
Right. And it's real. And this is so important as it, keeps going on. Just keep this timeline in mind as we continue down this discussion. So now that we know what security engineering is, we see where it's come from, right? Where it, where technology and security has moved on, right? We look at, well, how do I get to be a security engineer, right? Where does that come from? Where, this sounds a little bit interesting. What are the foundations of it? And when you look at, this is from CyberSeek. And when you look at where you develop these skills in the process, there's a whole bunch of different ways to get into security. We know that already, right? We know people who started in we know people who are in security that started out going to college, right? That's a recent thing where, they took information security as a major, right? That's a recent phenomenon. But we also know people that started out when, maybe they were just the sysadmin and they were asked to do the security thing, and then they got bitten by the bug and now they're doing security. Or maybe they were just an arts major looking for something to tide themselves over until they found a job in their field, and they stumbled into security, and now that's what they're doing, right? My brother was a poet of all things, and now he's working in the CISO office. Whoa, wait, how did that happen, right? We get into security in all sorts of ways, but the point of this slide is to kind of talk about the process that you become, that really enables you to develop the skills to be a security engineer. And you're talking about roles, whether it's in networking or system engineering or server administration. What do these roles give you? They give you the foundations of knowledge and skills and understanding that enables you to move into like a specialist or an incident response person, because those roles are built upon the skills and knowledge from the previous. And then as you progress in your career, you become maybe an analyst or a consultant or maybe a pen tester. And then why are those all sort of feed into an engineer role? Well, the reason is because of what an engineer really has to understand as a whole in the environment, in an organization. So you have multiple security roles in an organization. You have an ISO, an information security officer or information security engineer, who understands compliance and accreditation, certification. Then they understand policies, how regulations work and can be applied, can be implemented. They are working to do auditing and monitoring of the network, of the environment, to meet compliance, to meet accreditations. Depending on the industry you're in, maybe you have to be compliant, maybe you have to be certified. Insurance, cyber insurance has driven some things recently within the last 5 years, where you have to demonstrate that you are meeting best practices or some kind of level of secure implementation within your environment. CISA has really exploded in providing guidance and requirements for either guidance for companies or requirements for government agencies. And so this role, enables you to understand what the policy says and then how that actually is technically implemented. And then you have the role of the architect. This is a person that designs the network. So he is more that drafter. You think of somebody, an architect who's got that big drafting board with the pencil and the measure and the ruler and in the old days a slide rule, right? To do the calculations, understand how and where to put devices and applications and how to make what the configuration should do. They consult with the ISO on policy changes, on upgrades, new technologies. They're developing the 5-year plan. They're working very closely with your network folks and your IT folks to figure out where we need to go and how we need to get there. And then you have the analyst. So this person that's your typical SOC person, right? You can think about these are people that are monitoring, they're responding to alerts. You can think of the DFIR as falling under the analyst role capability. You can feel the incident response person, the threat hunter. These all kind of under that analyst umbrella. And so they're looking for signs of deviations from the secure state. They're investigating incidents and responding. And then finally, you have your network security. Let me rephrase that. Your network or server admins, and those are your IT people, and they're maintaining uptime, they're maintaining accessibility, they're maintaining your operations, they're ensuring everything's working, that you can get email, you can get to the World Wide Web, because a lot of people think if I'm not getting email, the whole internet's down, right? Well, that's not the case. We know that, but these are the folks that are responsible for that. So where does a security engineer fall on this? Well, kind of across everything. They overlap all of these. And in some smaller organizations, they may actually wear many of these hats, because a smaller organization, a lot of times, that's exactly how you have to work, where you have to do multiple things, take on multiple roles. But in general, what are they doing? They're implementing the architecture plans. They're partnering with the network engineer to ensure, again, that operations and developers do so in a secure manner that enables the business. They are working to ensure analysts can do their jobs. Can analysts monitor everything? Can they see all the logs? Can they do the investigations that they need to do? Do they have the right connections and access? And they enable the ISO to ensure compliance, to verify compliance, to document compliance, and to work to implement the regulations that the ISO is saying, hey, we have to follow these rules, these guidelines, these best practices. So what does that take? How do you get there? What kind of skills do you need to be successful? Well, first, you need some infosec skills. Obviously, we're security engineers, so you need infosec skills. So that means you have to understand security policies and best practices, but not just on paper, but what does that look like when they're actually implemented? How do you take those things from paper, implement them to demonstrate that you're compliant? You have to understand exploits and vulnerabilities. What does it mean for an application to have a buffer overflow, to have a memory-free vulnerability? What does that entail? And then understand, when you have a vulnerability, how does the exploit take advantage of it, and how do malicious users attack those vulnerabilities, leverage exploits? And then what is the defense for those? And maybe the defense is detection. Hey, I need to know when this thing happens. Ideally, it's prevention, which is more than just patching. Patching is great. If we can patch, awesome. But if we can then patch and secure, that's even better, because now we not only remove the vulnerability, but we prevent people from attempting or leveraging that vulnerability. But above all, you need to detect the vulnerability, which comes a little bit full circle to best practices and security policies. Then you also really need to understand what a server admin does. This helped so much in my career early on when I was responsible for vulnerability scans, because I was able to take the vulnerabilities that were discovered by the scanner, go talk to the administrators and work with them to figure out how best to patch, how best to change the configuration. I didn't just throw that report over the wall and say, go fix this and come back, when you're done, or go yell at them when I ran the scan and nothing was fixed. I was really able to team with IT to work with them to understand, okay, what are you dealing with? How does your process work? And let's see if we can work together to reduce the vulnerabilities. And it was very, very effective. But in doing so, in working with them, I really got to understand operating systems. I really got to understand authentication, authorization, and how they work between different operating systems and between operating systems and applications. And that has become so much more important. We live in a world of just complete interconnectivity, which drives how do we do that single sign-on, SAML, all these open ID connections where we log in here and then it passes our authorization to all these tools, understanding how that works. Because once you understand that, then you can start thinking, well, where is it possibly vulnerable? Where do attackers leverage those things? Understanding apps and web servers and databases, those things are all really important. So, and then bottom line, then at the end of that, you start developing and start figuring out what scripting is and how scripts work and writing your own things. It's such a crucial part of infosec today. Then from the server part, admin part, then also understanding network administrator. And this is absolutely crucial because when you're doing security engineering, you are often working at this level. You're often understanding where the user is and where the application is and how you're getting there between the VPN, between going into the cloud, going from cloud to on-prem, and how that works. How that communication works, what protocols are going on there, what the actual exchange of information is. Understanding that at that level is crucial. Understanding where and how to implement the security controls to proper secure your environment. And my last one, oops, wrong way. There we go. And then finally, we're moving, I mentioned cloud admin, understanding which cloud environments are where, understanding SaaS and IaaS and what that means, understanding serverless architecture, understanding the terms and technologies, CI/CD are super important. Understanding that flow, the DevOps is all moving to this very fast deployments, right? You look at cloud and SaaS applications, and they're rolling out versions 4 to 5 times a day, right? How are you going to secure that? How are you going to protect that? Where you're looking at that kind of speed. Understanding these things is critical to being engineer. But the soft skills still are important. You have to communicate. You have to write. You have to present. You have to be able to take notes. Taking notes has saved my butt so many times where a person says, well, that's, we have to do this because of that. And I'm like, no, I remember in this other meeting, let me go back and check my notes. And oh yeah, we said this back here. Taking notes is critical. Writing memos, documenting what you've done or what has been done is super important to be able to demonstrate, to talk to people, to exchange ideas, to understand where you were right and where you were wrong and why. So writing is super important. Project management, time management skills are super important. Understanding when to move on, what is dependent, what tasks are dependent on next tasks, as a security engineer, you're often going to be in charge of projects, of major rollouts, of doing things by yourself, because you probably are going to be one of few engineers in the organization. So you have to manage people where you're going to be trying to get them to work together, often where they might have competing priorities because you are not directly over them. So understanding those people's skills, understanding how a diverse group of people under you, whether you're promoting diversity or you are trying to bring in more people, or you have those diverse people. And sometimes, let me be fair, you can have what looks like I'm not saying that word right, but a homogeneous group of people that after you get to know them are completely different. And so it's like, oh, wait, I've got to manage this person this way and that person that way. So that is important, the people skills. And you also need to understand soft skills, business skills, super important, because there are times as an engineer, you are going to go back to the security people and say, we're not going to secure this because it breaks that in business. That's totally countercultural to security. But as an engineer, because you are building things and planning things with the business in mind, as well as security in mind, sometimes you have to bring back something that's anti-security while at the same time mitigating the risk of that. So that's super important to understand why sometimes as a business case, you have to do something that may not be secure with the plan to mitigate it down the road. And then finally, problem solving and attention to detail is super important, right? All you're doing as a security engineer is problem solving. And finally, curiosity and persistence. That just, I believe, are just part of being a security person in general. So how do you get there, right? How, we talked about some of the career paths and the job roles that you have, but how do you actually go through that? Because it's not just the job, right? So as I mentioned before, a lot of schools are offering engineering degrees or in security or infosec degrees. I came from an engineering background, but many people don't. But you could start off there. You could also then get trained, right? Udemy, SANS, Anti-Siphon, which is from Black Hat Information Security, LinkedIn Learning Bootcamp. We're going to have links at the end of this presentation, which we will definitely share out the slides as well. But these are all ways to do self-training, or maybe you work with somebody and you're going to say, hey, we're both going to go through this Udemy class or this this boot camp to go through and learn, and we're going to quiz each other. So these are great ways to actually go through some of this. Like SANS, you're going to have to probably get your company to sponsor, and I know that's a whole rabbit hole we don't have time to go down right now.
Hey, Craig, I want to interject something
Yeah, sure,
real
go
quick
ahead.
on the previous slide. Yeah. Also, we're seeing a lot of universities offering these security courses and information assurance courses at the undergraduate level as well. And even now we're seeing courses dedicated to security engineering. So that's something to be looking out for when you're looking at higher ed. What programs and certifications are universities are offering in this area as well? In particular, you could specialize directly into cybersecurity engineering or information assurance, or even other specialties such as pen testing right at the gate by looking at that. And I would say that you probably want to make sure you check the curriculum as well as the school and making sure they're accredited or affiliated with some of the other organizations such as SANS or ISC Squared as well.
So addition to that, there's formal training, right? You can get training, vendor specific training, whether it's with hardware, Cisco, Juniper, Checkpoint, Linux, and Microsoft. The cloud folks all have great training. Many of that training is free or cheap because they want you to know their stuff, right? but you can get training with Splunk, with Sumo Logic, with CrowdStrike. Some of these who offer courses all the time. You can just look for specific training, using Google to find these things. And finally, they're self-taught, in which there's always going to be a component, always going to be part of your training and learning that is going to be self-taught. You can get all the formal training that you want, but you're going to have to spend time teaching yourself the areas that you're interested in, or that your job is asking for, or your career needs, to fill in those gaps. And so you can use, CTFs and NetWar and plug for my for building home labs. I have a GitHub with resources to help you do that. But there are conferences that are in person or virtual, like this one, or recorded, right? You just Google a topic and Google video, and you can find dozens of sources, dozens of sites to really boost your learning. You can look on the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Career. This is the worst acronym ever. I hate it. But it's not the worst acronym, but it's probably in the top 10. But you can look on this site. It really helps you discover what specific skills are often looked for specific tasks. And then finally, you can look at getting certifications. And we can have a debate at any time over beer or wine or whatever over certifications, good or bad, and that may be just a taste great, less filling discussion for those of you old enough to understand where that reference came from. But I think my personal opinion is that you get the cert you need to get past HR, and then you decide whether you want to get more or not. That's up to you. But certifications absolutely can help at some areas, and depending on some jobs, may require them, but they are available, and they can really boost your career. So with that, now that you know, okay, how to get there, where to go, let's talk about how that security engineering really works into everything, and that talks about the framework we want to get to.
So we've come up with this framework, and we try to keep things simple. It's related to other things that we've experienced in our careers and certifications and things like that. But it looks like something that it's very simple, very, very open for you as a person who is beginning their career or establishing their projects in security engineering, something that you can relate to, right? So we look at the security of an organization or a project, we look at the operations in which they're affected, and then we look at the business side. So I understand it kind of has a nice ring to it, the OSOB there. But this is probably the meat of our talk that we would like to present to the audience as well. So let's start off with the next slide here, and I believe it goes into security. And so when we talk about security, we talk about what the function is that is implemented here. Are we looking at something to protect, something to be monitored, and something to report on in the instance of breach or compliance, right? Then we look at the standards in place for these things. What are we following? NIST? Are we following HIPAA? Are we following a combination of that and maybe PCI or something like that? And then, is this a service that is a cybersecurity service, or is this something that is of a business nature or something like that? If we're securing the financial pay systems, are we looking, or we're going to be looking for things to expose fraud or irregular payments or things like that, right? If we're looking at network platforms, we're looking at irregular traffic. We may be looking at activity, or potential unwanted activities, or scanning, or something like that. And then from there, we can derive our security key performance indicators. what can we establish and refine on our mean time to detect, our mean time to resolve, and our mean time to contain. If we're talking about ransomware, how effectively can we detect ransomware on the endpoint to mitigating that on that? How does that affect our overall situational awareness? How is there something where we can look at all the vectors and teams across the organization and see if we can get the right people to perform the right actions that help us in our security realm? So we also look at things like threat mitigation, investigations, and incident investigations, and so on and so forth. And again, the whole thing about this is that go back to operations.
Right.
Is that that's part of the triad that we're trying to establish in terms of the security. Your knowledge may vary as well, but at least in that framework, this is how we think about security. When we think about operations, we look at the business as a whole. What does your business do? Or what does your organization do? What are the services and products that it's providing to sell? And what is that of the responsibility for the security teams to protect? We look at everything that's involved, from DevOps to legal to HR, and on down the line. And then we look at the impact to the organization. Do we have the resources that are needed to sustain the security operations of the business? Do we have the resources for disaster recovery? What are those things that we need? Are we in a data center and we're looking to modernize? How does that affect the operations, and so on and so forth? And then, and of course, we're looking at our customer and clients. Can we protect their data? Can we protect our data? What does that entail from the role of the security teams and pieces of the organizations going forward? So that's the other part of the triad. And then we move on to the business side of the triad. We look at the stakeholders. Most of the time, like we mentioned before, the security engineers are the people who know how much things cost, what the services will be needed at that point in time. How are we going to request budget from our C-level suite, our management suite, and are we going to be able to sustain an operation for that product or service? Can we identify the KPIs again here it is again, that are essential for the business to understand that this product or service that we're implementing will benefit down the line as well. And then we can understand and contextualize the other security KPIs here as well, understand that we're decreasing our mean time to detect, we're decreasing our mean time to resolve and contain any of the threat actors or attack surfaces issues that we come across. And then on top of that, we also look at operating expense. So not just the cost of these services, but the cost to the company in general in terms of the personnel operations. Is a security engineer going to be the primary person responsible? Is it going to be another organization? Is it going to be the security teams or that is involved with that? So that is the effect, the pillars of our triad, if you will. And then what we do look at from this point on is examples and how we can integrate that. So for instance, we've all, over the last several years have been dealing with a lot of national issues of things like that. But for instance, we can take an example of something that's geopolitical and it affects an infrastructure, if you will. Let's apply the SOB to that situation. Are we, and from a security perspective, are we looking at what our attack surface is? Is it not just a network? Is it beyond? Is it physical? Is it cyber? Is it products and services or infrastructure and so on and so forth? What are the the security key performance indicators that we're going to be needing to do to accomplish this? And then do we need to adjust or include our augment our technology to help in this triad, part of the triad. From an operations standpoint, does that put more not stress, but more work and more burden on our security operations? Does that puts more or less burden on our network infrastructure, our detection regime, our vulnerability management controls? Do we need to bring in more help in forms of other teams such as penetration testing, sec DevOps, and so on and so forth? And then finally, again, if we're looking on attacks from infrastructure, does that affect our business operations? If a drone were to attack a physical piece of property, does that impact the operations? Do we need to have resiliency somewhere? And can the security teams, help with that resiliency or recovery efforts? Are we decreasing the risk down from that in terms of the disruptions of resources and supplies, and making sure that the business continuity continues as well? And then, of course, what is this overall investment cost for this as well? And then how are our peoples and stakeholders are affected on this? So again, that's kind of where we can see how we can apply the SOB. And if you go to the next slide, you can kind of see here's something that the things that what a security engineer would entail. So again, maybe for resiliency, we can move the operations to the cloud. Maybe we need to bring in advanced cybersecurity platforms, things that are on endpoints and mobile devices. From an operations standpoint, maybe we should integrate our hunting and intelligence teams more, or maybe consider a third-party security provider. Maybe we need to understand and define what that attack surface is. Now we're moving just beyond cyber, going to physical. We're looking at people logging, come badging into the facilities more. We're looking at anomalies and things like that in the physical infrastructure. And then on top of that, again, reporting back to our business and our C-levels that we are performing on those things with this project. Are we on budget? Do we have established return on investments? And are we performing on our security performance indicators and things like that? How many attacks, how many things have we identified, mitigated, and contained with the scope of the project, and how many we would go on forward? And I see we have 12 minutes left, so I want to go ahead and move forward with that. Craig.
Yeah. So, spoiler alert, right? There's definitely a need for security engineers, right? We know how many job openings overall in infosec there are, right? It's anywhere from 500,000 to 5 million, depending on who's counting. But there have been a number of calls that say, hey, make sure in all of this attempt to hire SOC people and analysts and incident response and pen tester, you hire security engineers. I was at a talk where Ron Gula, one of the founders of I'm drawing a blank.
He has a venture capital group.
He has a venture capital group, but he's known.
I think it's Gula Ventures.
Snort.
I think it's Gula Ventures.
Yeah. Snort, right? I believe came out of Snort, if I believe. And I totally apologize that I drew a blank on where he's.
Now Gula came out of Cisco.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. But right, but he said with the executive order that came out about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago now, right? That is requiring so much integration of new technology into existing infrastructure. He's like, we have to have security engineers to do that. You think about, the move to multi-factor authentication, the move to zero trust networks, as we talk about what does that mean and how does that work? I can tell you right now, I've been working on a zero trust demonstration lab, and it takes a lot of engineering to understand how to make multiple technologies work to implement the concept of zero trust. Take that and just explode that out as we figure out all sorts of information. So all sorts of new technologies coming down. So just by statistics, right? You look at the job postings for security engineers, and you see, wow, we've got, it's 18,000 across the whole US. The DMV in itself, has 10,000 of these, right? If you narrow it down. And you look at the different counts across the country, Lou, you pulled up this research, right?
Yeah. This is very fascinating. So we know that a lot of you are in the Washington, D.C. Atlantic Coast area. So we were trying to use specific sites, Indeed.com and Dice.com. Dice provided their annual technology report, and that's where we kind of pull these numbers from. But this is to show you essentially that just if you look at cybersecurity and related cybersecurity jobs, there are about 18,500 that are in Indeed as of today. There are about 10,070 that are in Dice. There are other places and other like ZipRecruiter, SecureJobs.net, and so on and so forth. But we wanted to take this because we could relate some of the data to it. But if you look at the country as a whole, you can see here that Texas, really has a lot of cybersecurity jobs. California, of course, if you're looking at the South and the West. And then if you're looking at the deep South, you're looking at Florida. And if you're looking at the upper Atlantic coast, you're looking at New York as well. The correlation here is that, as you can see here, the cybersecurity average salary, this is an average salary across the entire job market. But if you go to different regions, that average salary goes up or down depending on where you are, right? So and we've been doing this talk for almost 2.5 years now. And as you can see, there's been a small increase in the average cybersecurity engineer salary at the mid-level on the average. And we can talk more about this as well. But this is to show you that even the job availability across the nation is kind of segmented, but there are a lot of cybersecurity engineering and related jobs out there. The lower end of the salary range is around $80,000, and the upper end is around about $190,000. But the median here is 134, and so we just want people to be aware of that as well.
Right. Now,
and we want to make a correction earlier that Ron Gula is with Tenable and not with Cisco. But go ahead.
Thank you, Lou. I appreciate you filling in my gap on that. I do want, and we do want to emphasize that, security engineer is not really a entry-level job, because you have to know so much about networking and security before you're able, and business, before you're able to pull those skills together to really be efficient at it.
Yep.
So as we wrap up here, let's talk about one of the other skills I think it's really important for engineers. And so it's projecting forward and understanding new technologies and where they come in. So this is the hype chart, and it talks about how new technologies go through this line of usefulness, maybe, or expectations, right? You have a new technology and everyone's like, woo, this is awesome. It's going to solve the entire world's problems. And in 6 months, we're going to live in a utopian, world, right? So it's this huge, everyone has this huge expectations, but eventually that kind of peaks out. People realize it's not everything that they thought it was, or it's too hard to use, et cetera. And so then there's this steep decline of enthusiasm about this new product or technology or vendor. And then, but eventually, if that vendor or that technology is actually, real and legit and has usefulness, it bottoms out as people really start to figure out, well, okay, this can work, but maybe not the way I thought, but it can work. And they start figuring it out until eventually it's just like, okay, we need this, we use this, and we're making it more and more efficient. And every technology generally goes through this. Firewalls did. They thought firewall was going to be it. Everyone needed a firewall. and then they realized it wasn't as good, but then they figured out how to make it work well in the environment. IDS went through this, SIM technology went through this. And so what I've done here is I've kind of put on, a graph, and this is totally my opinion and maybe Lou's opinion about where these technologies are over time, right? Where they are as far as, their effectiveness and capabilities. And I think this is, and it's important to understand this, because when you are looking at, when you're as a security engineer, you're not just trying to implement current things, but you're trying to understand the new things coming down the path. So when your boss comes to you and says, hey, I just bought the latest whiz bang thing, the license is in your email, go download it and implement it, right? You already know, okay, well, here's how we can best use this. And so you have to, so keeping abreast of new technologies, new developments, new vendors, I get it. That's hard. It's hard to do that and your current job, which is already can be overwhelming, but it's still important so that, right, you can actually really go through and see and plan for this and understand the impact of those things. So this is I just threw these things on here, right? That, we have, some of the new stuff, ChatGPT, everyone's, raving about this right now, but it's not even close to, that peak. XDR is climbing up it. I think EDR is kind of just at the top where people are going to start being frustrated with it. On the other hand, right, things like machine learning and blockchain and SOAR, I think it's, kind of now on the uptick where people are like, okay, didn't solve the world's problems, but now we're figuring out how to use these things in a good way, in a more realistic way. Whereas mature technologies like your SIM and your firewall and your IDS, right, we've long since figured out what is actually possible and not possible with them. And I'm not saying we do all these things great, but there is an established history of how these things can be well used. So,
Hey, Craig, just
anything
a
you want to
note,
add to that?
we do have a question.
Yeah, I saw that. I'm going to
Q&A.
tackle
Oh,
that
yeah,
at
great.
the end.
Awesome.
I'm going to tackle
Okay,
that
cool.
at the end.
Go
But
ahead.
did you have anything to add on this one?
No, I just want, well, I guess I do. Yeah, we're looking at these things, and again, like Craig was saying, that this is open to interpretation. Again, this is really something that we like and introduced as new. This is new to we haven't done this in previous talks. Just we kind of pull from the Gartner hype cycle here for this as well. So just kind of want to make that statement. And yes, I do agree with his assertion on the hype cycle for those technologies there.
Awesome. So let's wrap up. And so security engineering, right? There's a purpose for this. We have a mission. It's been around and it'll always be around because we have to figure out how to. We need a way just to integrate all these things in a way that helps operations, understands the business, and implements security. And it's important to keep track of industry and technology trends. We know what the job market is, and we understand, hey, where does security engineering fit in all of that?
Yeah. And I do want to add to that, there's been a lot of news about layoffs in the technology sector. Cybersecurity still remains to be strong, even if there are layoffs at major companies, the FANGs and all this other jazz. Cybersecurity is still valued and has opportunities in other organizations and not necessarily Fortune 500 or Fortune 1000 companies. So even though there's a downturn, we are still resilient in our job infrastructure.
Yep. So here's our contact info. The last couple slides are just a bunch of links, so I'm not going to jump in them, but let me jump to this question Ronnie had. Describe a time where you had to work with a non-technical stakeholder to explain cyber security risks and solutions, and how did you approach the conversation? Which is an awesome question, and I should have left more time for this. But hopefully James doesn't kick us off. But I think if I had to think about this, I would say that I've had to go in and describe implementing security controls where to meet compliance. I spent a lot of time in the DoD U.S. Department of Defense doing security, and they are very much driven by regulations and compliance to those regulations. And so you often had to go in and say, we need to do this. We need to make this secure. Change the configuration to increase the security, because of this regulation. And so a lot of times that was met with resistance because it broke a current process, either in operations because they're just trying to make things work. They want availability, they want uptime, or it made the user's job harder because they had to no longer could just sort of move things from this folder to that folder easily. And what usually the best way to approach that was to understand the goals that the user had, what they were trying to do and what their job was. And then you talk to operations and determined what the options they had were in the application, what options that they were what goals were they trying to meet for uptime. And then you really, this is where understanding the technologies and of operating systems and the applications came into account, because then I was able to sit down and work with both the users and the IT operations people to determine, okay, well, what if we did it, in this manner, where I was able to come up with a new process that may have increased the friction on the user's end slightly, but in the long run, both met the compliance of the regulation without interfering with IT, and perhaps even made it easier for IT, because sometimes that actually solved the problem that they had, while not bothering the user too much. So,
hey, Craig, let me get in real quick because we're going to be wrapping up soon. One other thing that I would say is that sometimes you have to understand whom you're talking to. If you're talking to the business owner or the CEO or the CTO, your approach is going to be different and more simplistic. Of that, you're going to be able to explain the problem as it relates to that business sector or a group of people as well. You're going to be very summary and try to relate that to that, and also be able to relate a solution to that as well. If you, like Craig was mentioning earlier, if you're going to be more technical, if you're presenting to more technical people, you might want to have more availability of a solution in terms of how we would go come over this risk, or have something more more analysis, like we suggest doing vulnerability scans or something like that. So you have a more technical solution for a more technical person, and a more summary solution for a CEO or C-level type.
Yep. So that's it. We're pretty much at time. So again, reach out to us if you have other questions, other thoughts. We'll probably post something, in the Discord where our slides can be found. And thanks for listening in, and thanks for hearing our talk.
Yes, thank you guys very much for attending, and look forward to working with Vic more.
Yes, thank you everyone for attending, and hopefully we'll see you at our 2:30 talk, which is right about now, with Leron Gray. If you're interested in anything red teaming or pen testing, this should be very interesting for you. So hope to see you there. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Talk to you later.